understand that the first night George slept at the White House, he had a couple of dreams. The first dream he had was of George Washington. And he asked George Washington, he said, "What can you give me that would help me do right by the American people?" And George Washington said, "Be of high character and tell the truth." And he had another dream of Thomas Jefferson. And he asked Thomas the same question. "What can you tell me that will help the American people?" And he said, "Well, just work hard to preserve all the freedoms and push education." Finally, the third dream was of Abraham Lincoln. And he asked Abraham Lincoln, "What can I do for the American people?" And Mr. Lincoln advised him to go out and see a play. I'll tell you a nicer story about George, and then we get on with the program. George and Cheney were driving through Texas, and they stopped at a little diner. The waitress put down some menus, then came back to take their order. And she asked George, "What would you like, sir?" He said, "I'd like a quickie." She said, "What? What is it you'd like?" He said, "I'd like a quickie." She said, "They're all alike." And Cheney leaned over and he said, "That's quiche, George." We have a couple of announcements here tonight before we get started in the regular program. By the way, I'm glad to see all of you here. It's a nice bunch. The first person is Linda. Where's Linda? Here she comes. She's all dressed up for the occasion. I'm making the announcement.
As always, you're a tough act to follow. Hi, I am dressed for the occasion, and I'd like to invite many of you who are ready to consider themselves seniors to join us the first Friday of every month here, because through the efforts of Lisa Villasenor and Renee Gander and Lola Babalone and a bunch of other people in the canyon, we have a lovely lunch right here, and about 15-20 people have been coming over the last year. It's changed from the hearty group of 7 that we started with, and we're in our 3rd year now. So if you know a friend or neighbor, or you can just pass the word, or you'd like to join us yourself, we're here from noon till almost 2 o'clock, depending on how long folks like to sit and chat. And we're having lunch and eating brownies, and Children's Corner's baked cookies, and there's lots of great homemade food. So join us for that senior lunch the first Friday of every month. And we do it come rain or shine, whether we have Topanga days, whether it's the Friday before the senior dinner in December. We're always here for you, and we love the group, so we'd like you to join us.
What's the age minimum for
Whenever you feel ready, and if you don't want to call yourself a senior, you can be a volunteer and you can bake some cookies, or call Lisa Villasenor. You can call 1980 and make some soup or some bread or a salad, and just come and take part in it, because the group will grow as long as you have it in your heart to help it. So thanks, come along.
Thank you, Linda. And now, Buzz. man behind the camera.
Hello. Hi. I'm making an announcement. It's too loud. For the Topanga Co-op preschool, you've all heard of it. The Topanga Philharmonic Orchestra is playing April 28th. It's a benefit for the co-op, the preschool, and you're all invited to come. This was an impromptu announcement, so I don't have any canned information, but you can call my wife Terry for tickets at 0666, sign of the devil, and get tickets. I think there's fancy reserve tickets, and then there's general seating as well. Actually might sell out this year. We were afraid we weren't going to sell any tickets, so I think we may have overcompensated. So it may be the first sellout we've had in a while. I especially want to thank many, many people who I see here who have helped volunteer. It's been a tremendous response from the community this year. The co-op went through some hard changes and is now thriving. But the amount of love and care in the community for the children in the school is just phenomenal. So I'd be remiss not to mention that often. Does anyone have any questions? Everybody knows what the deal is? Anybody new doesn't hurt what it is? Yes?
What ages are in the co-op? What ages?
Oh, it starts around 2 and goes up to kindergarten, just before they enter kindergarten. So it's diapers to kindergarten. The program is really great this year. Guido's come up with some special stuff, and there's a special halftime show this year, so I think there'll be some nice surprises. Thanks.
Now we have an incident of historical significance. Army is going to make the presentation.
I was so happy this evening when Melvin Penny spoke with me and said that he had something that he wanted to give to the archives of the Historical Society. And he pulled this out, he showed it to me, and this is the original Articles of Incorporation of the Topanga Historical Society. And it's dated March 12, 1977. And it's certain things like this that make my heart beat a little faster when I see original signatures here. And I'm going to read them off to you because some of these people you will know. The president at that time was Julia Stewart. Vice President Wilfred Bayoff, I'm perhaps not pronouncing all these correctly. Secretary Doris Tracy. Treasurer Catherine Penny. Director Connie Haskis, who's still on the board. Connie, where are you? There. Director Albert Hoyt, another director Catherine Hoover, another director Marie Bach, Georgia Robinson, Cordelia Bland, and Charlotte Gutshaw, I think it's pronounced. So this is very wonderful, and thank you very much, Melvin. We'll put it right in the files with the Topanga Historical Society where it will stay nice and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ami, and thank you, Mel. Now, without any further ado, we'll get on to the program. And the person who's put the program together is going to be the Mistress of Ceremonies, is Mary Bloom, our new program chairman. You notice we have a woman program chairman, and we have, she's going to introduce another woman who's going to be in charge of the program.
Chairperson. Chairperson.
What's that?
Chairperson instead of chairman. She's a troublemaker, just ignore her.
No, she's not.
Oh, excuse me.
Anyhow, I think it's a tribute to the feminine empowerment, the extent to which women are running the show these days.
Oh, you think that's something new?
Mary Bloom.
Yeah, really, yes.
Gerry said, my very first program since being recruited as a program chairperson. So it's wonderful to see such a great turnout and all you friendly, familiar faces here. And I'd like to thank especially our special guests who we've invited here to share their personal Topanga stories. And they are Pine Tree Circle's Steve and Leslie Carlson, the Messengers, Michelle Johnson and her husband Gerry are here, Dr. Doug Roy, TSEP's Pat McNeil and her husband Jack, Topanga Online's Gary Meyer and Patrick Hedlund, the Historical Society's own Ami Kirby and her husband Doug are going to share with us, and my husband, Topanga Mail and Messages, Lee Bloom. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Historical Society's longtime secretary, and would like to thank her for all her help in putting together this program, Pearl Sloan. She's going to be our moderator tonight.
I think that maybe we ought to also say what Mary didn't say, that our tentative program in July is going to be at, what's the name of that Staples? Mill Creek. At Mill Creek Staples. And we'll have a horse show and we'll have a picnic. And I think that, and that is also a very historical area down there. So that's just a little bit. Talking to that, listen, I'll blast him out. Say that, Billy. I think we also should say a very high hello to Louise York and Ken. Okay, let's start out with Doug and Ami Kirby. Now this is very informal, you have to know that, okay? What? Well, those thinkers in here. Why don't you sit next to each other, huh?
Now my wife says, why don't you start? There was you start. We were talking about feminist advancements here, yes. We have both decided that we're not going to tell the same story. Married couples having sometimes different views of the same incident. And so the first time I came to Topanga, I was 15 years old in 1945. I had come out with my parents. The war in Europe had just ended, and my stepfather, who worked for the railroad, was taking the first vacation he had since 1941. We stayed in a house on Fernwood and Alpine. Those of you who remember Dick Boltman know that Dick lived there for many years. The house was wonderful. I had a friend come with me. We were kids from a tract in East LA, and here we were out in this incredible place. We could come and go as we wanted. It was the safest place I'd ever been in, where I felt safe. There was a wagon on the property, and having grown up in a hilly neighborhood, we knew about soapbox coasters. We would coast the wagon down to Fernwood and dump it in a ditch in front of the forester's office down where the fire department is, to the amusement of the foresters. They've got to look forward to us every day rattling down the hill. We could then hitchhike to the beach and surf all day long and hitchhike back. The community as a whole was very relaxed. Everybody seemed to know everybody. That was very different from where I had grown up. And below us, in a house just below us, I need all the help I can get, were some opera singers. And they would go sing their scales and cadenzas all day long. And this gave us no end of amusement, two rowdy 15-year-old kids rattling about. And we had the downstairs part of this house, and down there was an old Victrola and a bunch of records. And among them were some records by Enrico Caruso. We only knew the name. We knew from opera from the Marx Brothers, right? And here were these singers. So in the evening, sometimes we'd crank the Victrola and shove it up by the window and play a little Caruso out across the canyon. And one afternoon, we'd come back from the beach and walk down Alpine and got some milk from our neighbors who had a cow. And come back, and we were sitting downstairs drinking the milk. And not far from our window, a voice came up singing Caruso. It's just singing these arias of Caruso that's live. It was wonderful. I'd never heard anybody sing like that. And here it was floating up out of the canyon, this disembodied voice. We never did see the singer. He sang for about 5 minutes. We were totally entranced. The next day, the newspaper said they dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima. And that was the end of innocence for us. But what that did for me was place Topanga very firmly in my mind. And one day, not long after we were married, we were thinking about where would we live. And the first place that came to my mind was Topanga Canyon. Thank you.
Doug and I were sitting at the dinner table last night deciding how we would tell our tale, and he said he would tell this wonderful story of his childhood. So I thought back to my childhood. I came from a very talkative Irish family, and family stories were told time and time again. And one of the stories that I heard was about Topanga. It was how rough the road to Topanga was, that going up the road once in an old Packard, someone was holding up the baby's bottle of milk, and by the time they got to the top of the hill, there was butter in the bottle. The other story that I was raised with was about my Aunt Clary and Uncle Johnny, who lived in Topanga during the 30s, the 1930s. Clary and Johnny Pearson. They lived here in the 1930s in the Fernwood. In the fire of 1939, my cousin Bill and Eileen were home alone, so the story goes. I've heard this many times. And my aunt and uncle had to go all the way around through the San Fernando Valley to get to their children. And when they finally got to their children, they were safe. And cousin Eileen had taken the family silver, had put it in the little red wagon, while cousin Billy was watering down the roof with the hose. And so that story stuck in my mind. And to this day, well, they left after the fire of 1939. But to this day, when I meet my cousins, they do like to recall the beautiful life, the life of freedom that they had. And as Doug talks about the feeling of freedom and safety, that always stuck in my mind too, about the desire of what I wanted to have for my life and my children. And so when we were married, the thought about where we were going to live would be in the country, where there were no fences, where children could be free, and where we could build a house. Now, I understand that Pearl also wanted to have people say why they stayed in Topanga. We've told you why we came. And why we stayed, we were talking at the dinner table last night, was because of commitment. It was a commitment to building a house. We built the house that we live in now. We moved into the house in 1969. And then beyond that, it's the beauty of the Topanga and the community. So that is the end of my story.
Michelle and Gerry? I don't know if it's generally known that Michelle has an absolutely gorgeous blue singing voice. Someday May well have to have her sing. It's too bad we don't have Canyon Keepers anymore, so she could do that.
Thank you, Pearl. That's sweet. I'm Michelle Johnson, Gerry. I don't think a lot of people know that we actually moved in originally to Topanga back in 1975. You probably know because you were living down the road from us, but you may forget. But we moved into an old Topanga house, a rambling old, and then it was 50 years old, so now what is it, 75. And we originally we loved Topanga. We'd already visited up here to hike. We lived down in Venice. It was busy and crazy, and we wanted to sort of get some peace. So we came up here to rent originally. We had a rental all set out of a woman who was leaving only for a year, and she was going to, and we would take over her, not only her house furnished, but her dog. And then, so she said yes, and then she found a friend who would do it, and it all fell through because, you know, obviously you'd rather leave your house with a friend than some stranger, especially your dog, than us, yeah, maybe so. But we had already kind of gotten our mind into Topanga, and we actually had enough for like a little down payment on a house, but we were like 25 years old, and it never occurred to us to actually buy a house. That seemed like a big move, but this sort of led us to think, well, if we want to move to Topanga, we'll just have to kind of try to buy. So we came up here, and there was an old realtor who will remain nameless, who we told him exactly how much we had to spend, and he found us a house that cost exactly that amount of money. And this house, at the time we moved in, was like a wreck. They had 4 different groups of renters living in different parts of the house. Nobody ever used the living room, and there were like cobwebs growing. We went through the house once. What?
There were, in the corners, there was so much dirt that small shrubs grew.
And we only saw the house, twice? Before we bought it. And when we saw it, it was filled with people. You felt embarrassed, we're kind of going through it. So, but it was big, and it was on like 4 1/3 acres, which was almost all this hill in the backyard. And but still, you know, we just wanted that space, and so we took this flyer. And I had nightmares, you know, after they said yes, and we really didn't even know what the house looked like when we were going to come into. And then we came into the house, went up to look at it, and it was almost fully furnished with stuff that we wouldn't want to keep. Because, including what we did want to keep, an entire, like the last 30 years of Life magazines that were all over the front porch. But then whoever had left them broke into the house within the next week or two and stole them back. But anyways, we had to move all this furniture out of the house, and we put it in a big pile in front of this house. If you know the house, it's on Old Topanga behind the apartment building, the one and only apartment building almost in Topanga, right? And actually, Dale Robinette bought it from us much later, which is another story. But anyway, so we put a huge pile of all the stuff from the house and said free on it, and slowly but surely, we kept some nice stuff, you know, a captain's chair, they left everything. But slowly but surely the pile went down, and we still had to haul like a couple of loads to the, as I remember, away. But then we started the massive task of actually getting it together. And you can tell them too about how afterwards the visitors we got and that first cold year in that house.
Well, yeah, there were many people that used to live there, and they came back, and they'd say, well, I planted that tree. Some girls who had grown up there, and I planted that tree. And we kept waiting for Charlie Manson to come back. Luckily, he was in prison at the time. But you always wondered about who lived there at some time.
No, were the people in the middle of the night, though?
Oh, that's another story. We don't want to get into that one. That's when the police actually told me, you really ought to own a gun. But I never felt like I had to up there. I really didn't. We lived in the most remote area back up in there, and we always felt safe. And that's one of the great things about Topanga is that you really do feel safe. And in terms of what you were talking about, why do you stay here? I have told people time and time again at work and that I meet at parties or something like that, they say, why do you live in Topanga? And I say, well, I'll tell you what, if there weren't Topanga, I wouldn't live in Southern California. There isn't a place there isn't a place I know of that I've seen that I can imagine living in, and that includes Beverly Hills and Bel Air and all those places. I look at those places and that's not us, you know. Topanga, I come from Nebraska, and there's a lot of Nebraska in Topanga. I think there's probably a lot of Iowa in Topanga, Michigan in Topanga. There's a lot of Midwest in Topanga is what there is. And Topanga, if it weren't for Topanga, it's very possible that years ago we would have been long gone to somewhere else. I'm not even sure where that would be. But this is the greatest place in Southern California, I'll guarantee that.
Now, we moved away for several years. We moved away because we thought, well, we want to get in town where we go to work and live back in town, and we couldn't stay there really. So eventually, we ended up coming back here 15 years ago after spending several years down in Culver City, and now we've never looked back. In fact, my boy just met a girl who lives in New Mexico, but spent several years renting in Topanga while she was living out here. And it's like this real connection for them. Well, not just, I mean, they've been going together a year now, and I have a feeling if he ends up married to her, they'll have a little dynasty starting in Topanga. Thanks.
What about Gerry and Patrick? What about? And maybe Patrick will tell us why her name is spelled with a C. Also, about maybe 8 years ago,
It was longer than that. While we were still having board meetings in the Resource Conservation District, these two people came and did a pitch for Topanga Online. Well, the rest of us didn't even know what he was talking about. We didn't know what an online was. And so I'm very happy to have you guys here.
Well, I'm going to pass this right over here.
My name's Gerry Meyer. First moved to Topanga in 1982, way up on top of Saddle Peak Road. I didn't actually get down into town that much at that time. I was working at a place over the other side of the hill as the director of physiotherapy for the Ashram Retreat, which is a little place over there where all the movie stars in Hollywood would go for a week to work off the excesses of all kinds. So I worked there for about 5 years, and that's how and why I actually first came to Topanga. Where did I come from? Where was I just before that? Things were kind of a blur back there. Oh, right. I was over in Simi Valley running my own holistic health center for about 5 years. And so that's why I came. And I did have to spend a couple of years down in Santa Monica there in the interim, living in Santa Monica in an apartment while producing documentaries, and things got pretty busy down there. And going back and forth got to be a little too much, but I came right back at my earliest opportunity. And Patrick tell you how she got to Topanga.
Well, that's an invitation. I originally had come over here after I was suffering the empty nest syndrome. My son had grown up and gone to college, and I'd sent him out of the country. You're gone. And I had been living in Tucson, Arizona, and over there we had quite a conservation movement. And the notion of coming to Los Angeles for professional reasons was like going to the belly of the beast. It was just so anathema. In Arizona, it's always the Californication of Arizona, and like LA is like the big evil. So the notion of coming here was when I had an invitation to come and do some production work over here. And I was sleeping on a cot in an editing room in Hollywood. And there was what we called the Tucson Mafia. There was all these production people who I had known in one way or another over in Arizona, and I'd done this whole series of television specials and session, was very involved with that. So I came over here and said, well, you know, I'll see what it's like. And because it's sort of like Disneyland for a production person, because you don't always have to be bootstrapping everything. There's a lot going on. So you can sometimes do your own stuff, sometimes help other people, so that's a cool thing. So what happened is that one of these people said, well, there's this house in Topanga, and my friend wants somebody to take care of it. And I said, well, you know, I'm working, I'm not interested. And I thought about it a couple of days. I didn't know Topanga from anything. It was just a sound. I kind of like the way it sounded, Topanga. It sounds kind of rhythmic, you know. And so impulsively, I called this person. I said, you know, maybe I would like to come look at that place. And he says, well, it's a good thing you called just now because I'm on my way to the airport. We haven't met. But I'm going to be in Africa for 3 months and I need somebody to watch the house. I'll drop you off the keys if you meet me at Topanga Canyon Boulevard and PCH. and if you don't like it, don't worry about it. So, I mean, all right. So I actually met this person at PCH and Pacific and Topanga Canyon Boulevard, and I had the keys. And I came up to paradise. Literally and figuratively, I found my way to paradise. It was on Paradise Lane, and it was divine. I mean, it's this great big 3-story, A-frame with a swimming pool. And there I was, this guy's unpacked stuff. So it was like, looking at a disaster zone. So, there I was, finding myself absolutely, abjectly in love with this environment that was just like cheating. I had come over to be a professional drudge. I was going to, just steal it through all the smog and all of the, horrors of LA, and here I was literally in paradise. It was a total dream. And so obviously I fell in love with paradise, totally. My neighbor came over and he says, what are you doing here? I've got 5 kids. Who are you? I've never seen you before. And I said, well, I'm a writer and I'm a producer and I'm sort of here taking care of this guy's house. He said, let me see the stuff you wrote. And so I gave him everything I'd ever written. He took this great big pile of homework home, came back the next morning and says, you're okay. And I had 5 kids in my life for the next year. Those kids were always with me. So, I just loved that feeling. It was like being home. Just the quintessence of just feeling this is the right place. There was just such a lovely thing. But then it was time to leave because, people got back and I had to give back the keys. And it was like a diaspora for me personally. I was like, oh no, I was back down to California, down to what, was LA. So then what actually happened and how I got back here was, do you want to sell this part?
Sell this part?
Yeah. No, tell this part.
I was working down in Santa Monica at the Empowerment Project where we produce documentaries. And one early evening, I was outside, out on the street, monkeying around with a Chevy van or something or other. And I look out the door of the van and I see this angel bouncing across the street.
Who was she?
That's what I was wondering. Smiling and saying, what's going on over here? And I don't know, what would you think if you saw her bouncing across the street toward you?
I'm glad I handed you the mic.
So I fell in love at that moment. But something interesting happened is that we just kind of talked a little nonsense for a few minutes, and then she said, well, I've got to go, and she disappeared. And I didn't know who it was. I didn't ask her name. And it turns out that we actually met again, I think within a few weeks or a month or a couple of months. I kind of lost track of time on that one. But we didn't know the second time we met that we were the 2 people who had met the first time. So we went for a very long time not knowing that we were the people who had first met. Until one day we just kind of, it dawned on me, I think, and we figured it out and said, that was you?
But Topanga comes in here real quick. Oh, this was it. Oh, well, he was the production manager of this facility, and I was there because I had so much work to do. I won't even go into it. But he says, look, if you need any help, just call me. And he says, I'm off for the weekend. I knew people down at the Empowerment Project never took weekends off. I mean, it was like, these are like, 24/7 kind of zealots. And he handed me his phone number. And it said 455. And I looked up and I went, oh, you live in Topanga? And the next day he came in, he kind of stood there, and he's a pretty shy guy. And he says, you want to go for a hike? And that was it. I mean, he had a little log cabin up on Fernwood Pacific. I mean, this one-room log cabin. And that was total love. We just hiked and hiked and that's it. But, and part of the thing, the Topanga Online whole thing is just that we've been working on all this stuff about online and networks and all that kind of stuff, and we just decided it would be really fun to make a hometown in cyberspace kind of a thing and say, could you take all this fun and all these things that people love, and could you actually put it in this weird world that people were starting to colonize called cyberspace, and how could you do that? And so really Gerry's been the papa of that, and in some ways, I mean, it really is just kind of something that we just really love to share and just make it an extension of what we love about Topanga, which is all of you guys. And the Historical Society was really the beginning of it, coming and saying, come on, we want to put and then Gerry became the you drafted him into being the vice president of the Historical Society. So we're just in love with all you guys in this beautiful, beautiful place. It's been a love story for us.
And just to sum it up, I actually really like Gerry Johnson's description of why stay in Topanga. It's really, if it weren't for Topanga, there would be no reason to be in Southern California. Very nicely said.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, what about the McNeils?
Yeah.
Oh, heads up. We have to know if they have had any other life aside from TSEC. Keep it. We need a cat to show
Well, my first introduction to Topanga was back in the early 50s. When I was in high school, I came out here and hiked, and my love at the time then was snakes and amphibians and reptiles. And Topanga had quite a variety. And as a matter of fact, when I was out here in the early 50s, there were red-legged frogs everywhere. And of course now they're just about extinct from this area. But it was just so beautiful and so different from the valley where I had lived. And that idea always stuck in my mind. And then in 1968, my dad decided to buy a piece of property out here, and he bought a piece of property up in the post office tract. It cost all of $4,700. And he ended up selling it, and we had to do a survey on it, and that's when I started to do some work out here, and then brokers found out, oh, we found a surveyor dumb enough to work in Topanga. And so over the years, I've been in underneath everybody's rock. And then in while I was working in the early 70s, I was always looking around for a piece of property to buy. And in 77, we bought our piece of property and moved on to in a trailer while we were building the house. And we had some interesting experiences that would only happen in Topanga. I remember one day I got out and I was looking at the trailer that we were living in. It was about a 32-foot travel trailer, plus we had a little construction trailer for my son's bedroom. And in my office. And I look all around the edges of the windows and the doors, and it's all moving. And I'm wondering, what's going on here? So I look closely, and it's completely lined with bees all around the edges of every door and window. They were taking away the new silicone sealant caulking that was around every window and every door. And I couldn't believe it, so we hit it with a hose and go on and get lost bees, and that didn't work, so we tried Raid, and that didn't work, so we called up the company because other people must be having this problem, and they said, your trailer, we tried a brand new type of caulking, and the bees do like it. So they came out and completely recaulked it, and it's just, things like that are just so neat. It's, the problems you have living here are unique. And, we went ahead and built our house and moved in. And,
Can I ask you 2 questions? Sure. Did you have water up there then?
Yeah, there was county water available when we moved. This was in 78.
Oh.
Yeah.
And were you able to borrow money to build your house?
We were able to do that, yes. We found one bank in Woodland Hills that would lend money to these people out in Topanga. And so we were able to do what we needed to do. And of course, my son and daughter, my son now lives in Topanga. He was with us.
I'm his mother. I think that qualifies.
And to take it on further.
Smart guy.
I was thinking he was up here by a solo. The first time I came to Topanga was with Jack's parents when they bought the piece of property. That was my first time up here. And then we were up here many times after that. But interestingly enough, when our daughter was married in 76, she was married at the Theatricum. It was one of the first weddings they had, and I can remember going out there, and Will Gear was out there in his bib overalls tending to his garden. And it didn't look anything, of course, like it does now, but it was a beautiful setting for a wedding, and then we had the reception back at our house. And then after we sold the house and came out to Topanga, I'll never forget our first night in that trailer. I was so excited. I made him promise he would never take me back to the flats. I said, I never want to go back and live any place but Topanga. And I have not regretted it since. Living in the trailer, there were many experiences living in the trailer. In fact, at the time I was very involved with the school district, Los Angeles Unified School District, and I spent a great deal of time down at the Board of Education. And Jack called me up one day, and we did not have our driveway paved. He wanted to wait until all the heavy equipment and all that stuff had gone on because he didn't want to ruin the driveway. Right. Well, if many of you have seen our driveway, you know this is a challenge because it had been raining very, very, very hard. And he called me, and I'm down there, and he said, you can't come home. And I said, what do you mean I can't come home? He says, you can't get up the driveway. He says, find a place to stay. So I stayed with a friend down there. The next night I said, I'm coming home. So So I came home and I trudged up that driveway and I found that rubber boots did no good on that dirt. I couldn't even lift my foot a third of the way up that driveway. I found the best way to walk up that kind of mud and that kind of dirt is to go barefoot and then go to a hose and wash your feet off. Otherwise, you just lose all your shoes. So we were supposed to only be in that trailer for about 6 months, 10 months. Well, it was like 17 months. 15, yeah, that seemed like forever. We were going to keep this wonderful little travel trailer, and I thought it would be really good to, take on trips. By the time we were through, I told him I didn't care if he put a bomb in it. I never wanted to see that friggin' thing again. So we got rid of the travel trailer, and I haven't regretted moving to Topanga at all. It's been wonderful. I got to know a lot of people when I opened the travel agency. Jack knew him because he had done a lot of work for people, and I was just Jack's wife. And that changed. Anyway, but we were so thrilled when our kids decided to build a house here, and we're starting another generation, and our grandkids are going to Topanga Elementary. And my regret is our daughter lives out in Castaic, which is a rural area too, nothing like Topanga. I wish we could get her out here because she's a horse trainer and she would love it out here. She wants her dad to build a ring up at our place. And I said, dream on, girl. Mom would be out there with the horses. But it's been a wonderful experience here in Topanga. I regretted having to sell the travel agency because I got to see a lot of people on a real regular basis. And I don't get to see them quite as regularly, but I've become involved in various things that I see a lot of people a lot. So that's about it. Okay.
Originally, we came from New York.
You don't have a New York accent.
Long Island. Well, it depends on who you speak to, what they think. And I'd come out here for a large project, downtown Los Angeles, the old Pabst Brewery. And they were just closing it out. Actually, the first time, that was about 1980, and the first time that I was ever in Topanga was after coming out here and not really knowing anything, because I didn't have too much to do with California before that, a couple of trips out here for a week now and then. We went ahead and looked in a magazine what to do, let's go somewhere on a Saturday or a Sunday, and we actually wound up coming out here to go to the Inn of the Seventh Ray. So after we got off of Pacific Coast Highway and was driving up that road with all the bends, and I've been on plenty of windy roads, but for some reason that day it was, I don't know, it just kept going, and where the heck is this place? So finally we went there, we had lunch, and then we didn't go there for quite some time. But anyway, the next time we wound up coming here was a few years later. I had a friend of mine that I met downtown Los Angeles, and he had just bought a house just right up Fernwood, a little past the firehouse, and it was a real fixer-upper, and I'd come up and look at it with him, being in the construction business, and give him a little information, look at it, and I started coming up, staying the night, and that was actually the one thing that I really liked about Topanga was the evening. Daytime was nice, it was a beautiful place, but there was just something about evening for me, the quiet, there were actually stars that I could see. A funny one about that is, I had a friend of mine that worked with me downtown for many years, and he moved up to Petaluma, and he took his 3 kids up there, and his kids looked up at the skies, and they said, wow, look at all the airplanes. It's actually my daughter was born living downtown. We were living on a roof. The project we're at is basically artist loft, so we were actually living in a roof unit there. And we had actually moved to Pasadena when she was about 3, right before we moved here. And one morning she's going, Mommy, Mom, what's that? What's that? And we're, looking, what is she talking about? And you know what it was? She was hearing birds. She heard pigeons before. I think there was a parrot one day landed on the roof, but that was about it. But anyway, what happened is I kept coming and visiting with my friend up here, and I got to, know Topanga a little bit. And I guess after about 6 years of working downtown Los Angeles in 1986, we were getting burnt out from working 6-7 days a week, and we actually decided we wanted to get out of that and go find a piece of property and do sort of the back to the earth, quality of life type of thing. And we kept going up and down pretty much the coastline. I had bought pretty much all the geologic survey maps all the way up to I don't know where, and way up there, Mendocino and all that. And we looked everywhere for property, and we actually found a few things up around the Russian River, where we actually almost moved to, but that did fall through. And so after I had done that, Leslie was with me on quite a few trips. I had done a few of them myself. We even looked in Napa. We were just looking all over where can we go, because we want to go to a place with land and, country. And we wound up coming to, with our daughter and our friends, have a few children. They used to have the children's fair over where the Pine Tree Circle is right now.
Thank you, Linda.
Linda, yeah. And so we were there. My daughter was about 3 years old, and we're looking around and enjoying the fair. And having been sort of at a loss at that point of everything else I was thinking about wasn't really working out, I looked across the street.
Because it was at the Pine Tree Circle.
Because it was right at the Pine Tree Circle, and looking past the post office, I said, I wouldn't mind living right there. So then the thought entered my mind a little bit more, and we got a little more serious about it, and we said to ourselves that for our desires for what we wanted to move on to a property that was at least 10 acres, for just to have the room, the freedom, go in your yard, do what you want to do. You want to plant a tree, you don't have to worry about, we weren't, we didn't want to move to something small. We wanted to just have the room, the freedom to do what we wanted. Ha ha ha. And so I researched it, found out who the owners were, called them up. After a couple of months, we worked it out, bought the property. And so then I went ahead and got myself a small bulldozer and put in a road, prepared the area where the creek was, got some 20-foot culvert, 6 foot in diameter, brought the trailer on the side of the road, knocked the blocks out, and both the pipes went in the creek, and I just put some dirt on them, and that was my bridge. And then went ahead and got a cement mixer with 2 local guys, Michael Mickler and Michael Murphy, and we hand dug all the foundations, hand poured with the mixer the footings, and as well as a septic system, formed it up, poured it all. And then I went out and bought a double-wide trailer, and going up that dirt road that was about 800 feet with about a 30% grade, we had my 4-wheel drive pickup truck in the front with the tractor from the trailer company pulling that, and a backhoe behind that, pushing it and shifting it around the corner. We got it up the hill, got most of it in place, and then the next morning we finished the job. And for the first 2 months that we were there, we ran on a generator, and we had a 700-foot garden hose from Max Trump Power. And that's basically how we got here. And as I've always said, is if I knew a better place, I'd live there. Leslie doesn't like to speak.
Well, good. We're glad you're here.
Yes.
First time that I really was in Topanga, and, within this wedding. And, yeah, a house. This was my introduction to Topanga. His house I helped him move into the house, but before we could move anything in, he had to have an exorcist come and exorcise evil spirits from the house because there was something weird about the house. So it was a weird house, yes, but I don't think the exorcist got rid of what was weird about the house. The sink was built into the mountain, and the tub, was carved out of the rock and stuff. So, so I think that what was there was still there later too. Yes. And we were looking for, actually, Gerry and I met in college, and we both, everything we did, it seemed like we've done at the same time all of our lives. We were at places when we were kids, we were at the same events and stuff. I even crashed a party at her house one time before I ever knew her, when we were in high school. And so everything we did, we just seemed to always be on the same track with things. And we were looking to move out of Hermosa Beach. I was going to UCLA, studying landscape architecture. I was doing a project for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy on a piece of property in the Simi Hills. And so I was driving through here all the time from the west side to get to the Simi Valley. And we were looking to move out of the city. We were looking in Newberry Park and stuff, but we didn't really find anything that felt comfortable. And one day we were talking to our brother-in-law, and he was suggesting that we stop and look in Topanga, that we've always been interested in, we have animals, and we've always kind of lived a little more, even though we were in a small piece of property in the city, we lived kind of a rural life. And in a lot of ways, actually. And he said, so we ought to look up there. And he said, besides, you already own 2 Volvos. You'll fit right in. So that's how we got up here. We ended up moving on to a place, East Hillside, off of Rosario and Hillside, opposite Froggy's in 1990. And I finished up at UCLA, but I was lucky enough to graduate when there was no work in California. There was, so I was sending resumes out daily looking for jobs, local jobs with landscape architecture firms. And one day I was down sending a resume out at Topanga Mail and Message, and I overheard them saying it was for sale. So Mary and I talked about it, and we ended up buying Topanga Mail and Message until we'd been about a year here before then. And I kind of was, I was living in Topanga, but I didn't really know Topanga or anything. Once I started having a business here, I started meeting people at a completely different place. Topanga became, I've never known so many people, I had so many friends, and felt so comfortable in a place. It's just, yeah, it is. It's like we've been here all our lives. Yes. Did you want to say something? Go ahead. Say something. Say thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here also. I wouldn't live anywhere else in Los Angeles. I have the same sentiments. And thank you to all our storytellers. You were all wonderful.
Well, everybody has talked about how wonderful it is up here. Well, when we were looking for property in 1947, we looked all over. There was nothing. There was no valley. There was no nothing. We could have gone anywhere. But Bill said, I want to live up in the mountains and I want to live near the ocean. So we drove through Topanga. I think it was in November, and it was raining, and I couldn't see any church, I couldn't see any school, I couldn't see any people. I said, I ain't gonna live up here a lot. Well, then, after looking everywhere else, we came looking at Old Canyon again, and this time it was in March, and it was beautiful, and so we too pulled an 18-foot trailer up with 3 little boys. And there was a line going across the road, and the realtor said, yeah, that's a water line. But what he didn't tell us is that there never was any water in it. and we didn't have a telephone. It was terrible. It was absolutely awful. I think I wept for the first 10 years of my life. But I wouldn't certainly live anywhere else in the world. No.
the next, actually our last speaker. Someone who's become, I like to think, a good friend of mine. We don't get to visit very much or near as much as we used to. I'm working in the valley. He's busy working in the valley part of the time too, I think. And but I always enjoy talking to him. It's Dr. Doug Roy. Thank
you very much. I have some audio-visual aids in case you're getting a little sleepy. Hold on. Shy. This is my son, Ian. And I was told that this was a story of Odyssey, and so I wanted to show you why I came to Topanga. I was born a small child in Sacramento in 1950, and after 10 days, my family, somewhat itinerant, moved to Pasadena, where they stayed for a month. And after a month, they moved to Tucson. My father was in the military. I had my first birthday in Tucson and moved to Osage City, Kansas when I was 2. And spent a year there and moved then to Topeka, Kansas. Stayed there for 3 years and moved to Knob Noster, Missouri, which probably Melvin knows. Knob Noster. We used to go down to the Ozarks to, play with the raccoons and get baptized.
I was in the other corner.
Yeah, you were in where?
Ray County.
Ray County?
Northeast of Kansas City.
We were just southwest of Kansas City, so it's all there. This is where I did my first surgery. At the age of 8, I transplanted all of the organs from my visible man into my teddy bear. This is true. When I was his age, I moved to New Hampshire, where the educational system was rather rigid. I had to study Odysseus in some of the original linguistics, and so we go on with the Odyssey. When I was 15, I moved to Miami and stayed there longer than any place for almost 8 or 10 years. Came to Atlanta to go to college at Emory, and back to Miami for medical school, during which I studied radiology in Portland, gastroenterology in Germany, and cardiology in London. Then I did my residency in Michigan and got a research fellowship at UCLA. And in 1980, when I finished that, I said, that's it. I'm not moving. I'm going to stay in one place because I can't do this anymore. And the sign on the classified said, "Pets Welcome," for a rental in Topanga. So it was my beagles that selected my location. And there was a twilight zone where you couldn't get into the place wasn't heaven if you couldn't take your dog there. The most interesting thing I find about Topanga is that it has a cohesive entity to itself. It is a town, unlike almost everything around here, which is melted into all of its neighbors. I thought you might want to have a thought or two on the future of healthcare in America. I think it's going to continue to be very cluttered and clumsy until the people take over the government. And it would be really nice to have something, thoughtful in a cohesive package that's almost as good as the rest of the industrialized world. I want to reflect on a couple of things I heard said about the people that were talking earlier tonight. I just want to say to Pat, you can still run a travel agency. I am having a terrible time finding a good one. And if you would start that up again, that would be fine with me. On the road to Topanga, what I heard was that a farmer let his goat run loose and chased it with a bulldozer. That's how they made the road. The Topanga Philharmonic, I don't know why I grabbed 3 of these newspapers. The centerfold of the current Messenger is entirely devoted to the magical metamorphosis of the Philharmonic. The halftime show will be John Gindig playing the harmonica, And someday he's going to take lessons with me. That's close to the middle. So this is the current messenger, and if anybody has anything special to ask of the Philharmonic, it would be to get Guido Lamel to play another solo on the saw. How many people have ever heard him play the saw solo? This guy is so wonderful. Also from the messenger, 10 years ago almost, the symphony was celebrating its 10th year, and this is about one of 10 times I wanted to kill Colin Penna, the former messenger editor, where he did a full story on me to celebrate my 10th year, and he didn't mention it on the front page. Which, this story, hold on. Also, Colin did not know what the word metaphysical means when he used it here, I hope. And this is a story that includes everything I believe about the basic politics of medicine and so on. This is my great-grandfather, Whit Duvall, who was a physician at St. John's in Baltimore in 1891, which was exactly 100 years prior to this message coming out. And so that's what I looked like with hair. And I got a few of these if anybody wants to pick up copies later. Scrapbooks. Also on the future of medicine, I think it's kind of exciting that Topanga is going to get a female physician. Cecilia Brown is setting up a practice. She's advertised in the yellow 455 directory. She's a UCLA family practice graduate. I called to see if she could come and meet you guys tonight, but I got to her probably too late. So I haven't heard back from her. She's fairly sophisticated daughter of a professor emeritus in endocrinology who's actually been very seasoned. She's worked in Boston for years, and she's just gone back and getting her family practice residency. Cecilia Brown. She'll be setting up, I think, in the Carlson Center. Is that right? Or maybe we'll say
When there is room.
When there's room. You should save some room for Pat's new travel agency, because that's my favorite idea tonight. I should tell you what's special about Topanga would be the two chicken stories. One, that I have received chickens as payment for my services, and I sort of always trained to be a country doctor, so all this fits. But the most delicate was when Michael Krager, who was previously president of the Lions Club and lived on Paradise, brought me his favorite rooster in great distress. And the rooster had been ripped by a coyote from here to here. And, you know, a lot of wild animals would be foreign to me, but I know this part of the chicken, you know. So I had two assistants hold the chicken down, and this is somewhat heartless, but without anesthesia, I repaired this rooster, and the rooster survived the surgery and lived for an extra 3 to 5 very happy years because he had 6 or 8 chickens in the coop with him, and he was the king of the roost. In historical terms, I watched the 12 or 13-part series called I, Claudius. If you haven't seen it, British Broadcasting Company, real sophisticated drama about one of the emperors of Rome. And it was said, it was legend, that he, as a young boy, had looked up and seen an eagle carrying a wolf cub. And the eagle dropped the wolf cub, and Claudius caught the wolf cub. And that was the myth that entered him into the emperorship as such. I also read in Julius Caesar, you know when I was moving, we started Shakespeare in New Hampshire, and we read Julius Caesar. I moved to Miami, we started Shakespeare, I read Julius Caesar, and I moved to another school in Florida, and I read Julius Caesar 3 times in 1 year. And there was a scene in it where the night before Caesar was assassinated, people had seen a lion roaming the streets of Rome, walking freely through the streets. And I thought that was also somewhat ridiculous mythology that anybody would have a lion in a city street. But when I drove home just before Halloween, about 8 years ago on Encina, there was a lion on the streets of Topanga walking in front of me, sauntering. He didn't care about my BMW behind him flashing my lights. He was just taking it easy, just like in the African movies, the mountain lion in Topanga on Encina. And Gabriel Chavez, David Chavez and Penny, or his mom and dad, told me he had witnessed a hawk picking up a German Shepherd cub and flying away with it, and then finding the cub a block away in Topanga on the street unharmed. Probably had bitten the eagle or the hawk, which those two stories are parallel to the ancient history myths, and sometimes there's sort of a real basis to it, which is somewhat amusing. The most important thing that's on my mind tonight is that we've started Wednesday night volleyball, and we really need some players. Wednesday night volleyball, anybody's interested, give me a call, and never give up getting fit. Thank you very much.
Where is the volleyball thing? Okay.
It's in my backyard.
Oh, all right.
It's been a delightful evening, but it's getting near bedtime for a lot of us old-timers. So good night, and we'll see you again in our next program. Just a minute, we have an announcement.
Sorry, I had another meeting, so I came a little late in case this has already been discussed. But there are so many wonderful stories of Topanga that are waiting to be told. I myself lived here during the 60s when things were really an active community here. So I would like to request how many of you would be interested in having another evening of Topanga stories and about events and things that have taken place, special historical moments. How many of you would be interested in coming back again and telling the stories? Oh, good. I hope we do this again. I've got stories to tell.
Let's live in a hideout at Topanga. Come on, let's head out to them hills. Lots of stained glass, cold water in the bath. We can live without those fancy frills. Let's live in a tree in Topanga. Maybe in the leaves they'd leave us be. We could live in a squirrel hole, play our rock and roll. Come out on the limb and you can be a nut like me, yeah!